It's been one hell of a week for Seattle Seahawks fans as they've had to take some not so good news at a couple of different turns here, and it doesn't get any easier today as it was announced just down the line here a couple of hours ago that the Seahawks are going to give in to DK Metcalf's trade demands and move him to the Pittsburgh Steelers for a late second-round pick. The Steelers are then going to extend DK Metcalf on a 5-year, $150 million deal that it would seem that the Seahawks aren't particularly or weren't willing to particularly spend, though we don't know that for sure, as of course DK was driving some of this in his request on the forefront of this. Metcalf is going to be one of those players that we look back in history of the Seattle Seahawks and we're going to be very frustrated in looking at his career here. We're always going to be left to wonder what really could have been. It wasn't a matter of the fact that he wasn't really consistent and really productive and that you could count on him every week, whether to run block or to go catch the football and make an impact in that way. He did so. That's not in question. He was a very good player. Many were waiting for him to take that next step to the 1,500-yard season, and he never could just quite get to that spot. But what's odd and what's frustrating about this is it's not necessarily going to be for some deficiency within DK Metcalf's game. There are many out there that would point to some of the lack of advancement in his game at times that would appear on tape when it comes to route running and hands. I think some of that gets sometimes maybe a little bit overstated, but there's the part of this that has to be laid at the porch of the team. DK Metcalf is a guy that this team has never really sought out in a manner to make the focal point and to be featured as that really true number one part of this offense. In fact, most of his career, most of the seasons that he was here, he was the number 2 target to Tyler Lockett. Now, some of that had to do with the distribution of the ball and working at a lot of different parts and how good Tyler was about getting open, but it also was an example of the fact that the team just never made him really the centerpiece up until really the first part of this year here with Grubb, where now you are using him in motion. Now you are using him out of the slot. And we saw DK on his way to having the best year of his career, on the way to being that 14, 15, 1,600-yard receiver, and then injury struck. He had the Atlanta Falcon game, jumped up for a ball, came back down on his knee, was never at 100% throughout the whole rest of the year. He tried to gut it out. He tried to be a good soldier and make his way through. It just wasn't working. He wasn't the same player at that point, and it was pretty obvious on the football field. And so you have this little sample size where you saw, oh, we finally did the thing for him that we've been waiting to do for years, and it worked. And then bam, here comes injury, and so now we won't really ever know if he could be really at that consistent place. Part of what I'm sure is going to be driving this from the Steelers' perspective as to want to bring him aboard and pay him that money is that they will have that outlook here and saying this Seattle team should have gotten more from this player. You guys short sold him a little bit, not badly so, not like they did DK dirty. I don't want to overstate it on that side of it, but you just left wondering what you could have done more to get more out of him if you featured him that way, as opposed to lining him up as an X receiver where he's going to face press coverage time and time again. Then he's going to have the safety over the top and they're going to be able to bracket him, because a big part of DK's lack of getting that 1,500 yards was Seattle's inability to pull the double teams off of him. We all remember that 2020 season, which was the COVID year, and it was a little bit weird, but DK was off to his best start because a lot of those teams were trying to play Seattle in the run game at the start of that year. They then went to the cover 2 shell, and now they could really drive those double teams over to DK on his side, and he was really neutralized, as many players would be neutralized if you get double teamed up at that rate. It's up to the coaching staff, the offensive coordinators to find those creative ways to be able to use him in different paths and fashions in order to get the most out of him. Hawks just weren't able quite to do that, though he was a sensational player when he was here. He was very highly productive. The Steelers are getting a hell of a player back in return. I've got to admit my own miss on this, where I thought with DK Metcalf we were going to be able to get back at the very least a first-round pick. So certainly getting back the late second-round pick hurts a little bit on this side of it. But the Seattle Seahawks had a choice that they had to make coming into this offseason. Do you want to pay DK Metcalf this $30 million market deal? Do you want to pay Geno Smith this $40-45 million a year deal? Do you want to add these 2 high-end contracts on your books? Or would you rather offload those resources in other places to kind of reset this thing and reshuffle this thing in a better way to fit more to the philosophy that both the coach and the front office would probably like to try to draw forward as we do move forward? And this would certainly seem to be a representation of that. But you don't get better as a team moving off a number 1 wide receiver still in his prime, still so consistent as DK is. He was an absolute dog and a warrior on the field. Many fans will get caught up in some of the mentality that would exist at play when he would lose his temper and go off at times. Sometimes there was some validity behind the temper, like when Fred Warner tried to go at his surgically repaired neck from behind when he couldn't see it. I think anybody in that situation would have got angry, but I've always said, if you give me 53 players with the mentality of a DK Metcalf, I'll show you a Super Bowl. It's a lot harder, it seems, in this day and age to get these guys wound up, to get them intense, to get them into that spot that they need to be in to play right on a football field when this is about getting after a guy with the will and the physicality. It's another thing to kind of see that from some of these other players as you just don't often do. But good luck to DK Metcalf. Thank you for all that you did in giving to this team and all that you provided here. It was entertaining as hell to watch you play the position. Hopefully you can go on and cap off this career over there at Pittsburgh and go on to what should be hopefully a Hall of Fame career. From the Seahawks perspective, you've cleared off a lot of cap space now. You have a lot of draft picks in your back pocket. You have a lot of different directions you can go. So it will be very interesting to see the next couple of steps from the Seattle Seahawks, as it's kind of hard to quite pin down exactly what they are going to do next. My name is Brandon Kane. This is the Hawks Nest. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe. But beyond all that, even when you lose your favorite player, don't you forget, go Hawks.